Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Jennifer Pearson. I am the Senior Director of Marketing and Outreach for the Lindner Center of Hope. We are so grateful to community partners and the Paramedic Network for hosting our online guests for us this evening. So we're excited to have so many people joining us. This is actually our first in our community education series for 2025. So we're excited to kick it off with a great presentation. Just a quick overview. Lindner Center of Hope is located in Mason, and we are a full continuum of mental health care, from diagnosis to treatment, and just ongoing support. We have everything from inpatient units and outpatient providers. We also have residential units, as well as ECT and TMS and other services. So really try to provide comprehensive care for everyone in need of mental health support. We are excited to be partnering again this year with the Manor House and the Countryside YMCA, who host our folks locally. So thank you to them as well. Manor House has been a longtime supporter, so we're particularly grateful to them. This evening, Dr. Schrantz is going to be talking about supporting someone with post-traumatic stress and opportunities to promote healing. And Dr. Schrantz is going to take it from here and discuss this important topic. Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. It's really good to see you. Thank you so much for coming out. Just learned that it's a weather impact day, and we're supposed to have snow coming in around 8 or something. So I'm guessing that's why a lot of people aren't here, but we have plenty of company online, apparently. Maybe like almost 200 people signed up. We'll see how many of them actually log in. So thank you for coming. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I am a therapist at the Lindner Center of Hope. I see adults, teenagers, kids, mostly outpatient, and some residential care. I've been at the Lindner Center for almost 9 years now. And before I worked at Lindner Center, I did a lot of work with different populations with post-traumatic stress disorder, and especially kids with post-traumatic stress. So tonight, we are going to be talking about supporting somebody with post-traumatic stress and just starting out really getting a feel for what exactly that means, because learning more about post-traumatic stress is the first step to really being able to support another person or yourself. I'm going to be kind of staying in this spot over here, just because this little thing is a camera and a microphone. It actually looks like an owl, which is sort of creepy, but kind of cool because it's got eyes that are the camera. So I would love to like float around and talk, and I might, but mostly I'm going to stay up here, and that's just letting you know that's why. So the folks on video can see me. Okay, and how we'll do it is if you have a question or something that you'd like to say, feel free to raise your hand and don't have to wait till the end. The folks online, I'll take their questions at the end, but if you're here in person and something seems really relevant, you'd like to share something, that is most welcome. And I will ask for input as well as we go. Don't be shy. Okay, so tonight, here's what we're going to do, just an outline of where we are. Like I said, the first step to really being able to support someone with post-traumatic stress is to knowing what it is and how it looks, maybe even how a person got those symptoms. So we'll talk about what those symptoms are. We'll talk about the various effects of trauma throughout the lifespan. So anywhere from young kids all the way through adulthood. We'll talk a little bit about the traumatized brain and how that works and how that really has such a big impact on a person's emotions and thoughts and behaviors. And then we'll learn some techniques to support others who are in distress, and even yourself if you're the one who is in distress or has post-traumatic stress. Okay. Can everybody on the video see me? Bob, if I'm out of view, let me know. Okay, good. Okay, so what constitutes trauma? So this, that I'm showing you right now is kind of like the textbook definition of things that can bring post-traumatic stress in a person. And just as like a little, something I will talk about later. So just as a teaser, not all trauma looks exactly like this. But this is kind of like the textbook version. So we think about someone who has trauma will have gone through something or will have seen someone go through something that's very scary, where their health and their safety is really violated or threatened. And not only that, but they will take that with them in the form of just really thinking about it a lot. So, and it's things like physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, maybe as a child. School violence is a big one right now. We're seeing more and more of that. Even just the threat of physical violence can really have an impact on kids. The accidental death or the violent death of a person that you're close to, such as a sibling, a parent, war, terrorism, being a refugee. There's all kinds of things. And we can even talk more about what might be included in sort of like a textbook example of acute post-traumatic stress or even ongoing post-traumatic stress. For example, a person who is living in a war zone is experiencing ongoing post-traumatic stress. Someone who might be in an abusive home, that's sort of ongoing. Sometimes people aren't even sure if they've experienced something traumatic because it just feels normal to them. And others know that, okay, that was an acute thing that happened to me and that was really bad, and I being able to recognize that. So when we think about post-traumatic stress disorder, and not everybody who has a traumatic experience will develop this. It really just depends on the individual person and their sensitivity, their personality, people around them. There's a lot of things that protect people from post-traumatic stress as far as their support and their environment and things like that. And there's other things that make people vulnerable to post-traumatic stress. But what it usually looks like is a person will kind of not be able to get away from the experience, that they will dream about it, that they will think about it when they don't want to think about it. It's kind of like if somebody was always knocking at your door and it's an intruder and you don't want them there, you don't want to answer the door, but the person, you know, that intruder is knocking at your door. And sometimes there will be different reminders of the event or the situation that will cause a lot of distress for a person. And if you're having this distress, physical distress, emotional distress, you don't want the distress at all. So you try to get away from it in different ways. And sometimes this can be tricky. So when you think about supporting a person with post-traumatic stress or even yourself, this is an important one, is thinking about how does a person avoid this distress? It can show up in different ways. It can show up by literally withdrawing from the world. It can show up as substance abuse, reckless behaviors, all kinds of things like that. So the next part that's really important about post-traumatic stress is that it really changes a person's way they see themselves and the rest of the world. So person is generally not looking at the world through rose-colored glasses anymore. Could be like grayscale glasses. It could be really dark glasses. Seeing yourself in a different way, that you've been changed by this, and not really sure about the rest of the world as well. So some people go through bad things and they don't experience this. They still see themselves in the same light that they did before. But this really is a hallmark of post-traumatic stress. So, and it can impact how someone interacts with others, their relationships, their own self-confidence and self-worth. And they might also have a physiological reactivity. So kind of like being on edge, feeling hyper vigilant, like looking over one's shoulder all the time. maybe acting out things, reckless things, kind of like there's something wired inside that you can't just quite turn off. So 4 basic things about post-traumatic stress to look for, again, are these intrusive thoughts or memories, trying to avoid them, feeling different about yourself or the world, and just having a different feeling in your body, having kind of a revved up feeling. It's hard to calm down. When we think about helping someone who's experiencing these, we can tune into some of these symptoms. And we'll talk more about that. Any comments or questions right now? Feel free to raise your hand. Yes.
Will you discuss later, you said there are some factors that can kind of decrease the effect of post-traumatic or like.
Yes,
traumatic things.
yes, and we'll talk about that. I think that's on one of my slides, and if not, I know exactly where to put that in my presentation. So thank you. Protective factors. Okay, so here's what we might see in a person who's experiencing some post-traumatic stress. And again, it doesn't even have to be full criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder. It can be kind of like a little bit or kind of like halfway. Person can still show these things. They might just have a lot of fear, like they don't really trust their environment. They might not trust their own judgment. They don't trust themselves sometimes. So it's scary. So interpreting the rest of the world can get kind of iffy. So there's fear. There could be a sense of depression. Like not seeing yourself in the same way can really impact how you feel about yourself and the world. There could be anger. So somebody acting out you might see in a person. It could be post-traumatic stress, not for everyone, but sometimes, like that's especially what kids do. Sometimes they may act out. Why is this child acting out like this? And because they have this anger inside. Avoidance, like we talked about before, and just basically having trouble dealing with the stressors in life because they don't feel like they have that reserve. They're so busy tending to their sense of not feeling like they're the same person, like the world is kind of a scary place. It's hard to deal with just basic stressors. Just to throw it out there, does anybody know anybody who kind of looks like they might be experiencing this based on fear, depression, anger, avoidance, and difficulty dealing with stress? You don't have to share who or what, but okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about something called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. It's a really interesting, fascinating study. And I'm going to talk about this because not just kids, but as adults sometimes who have been through difficult things as a child growing up, it doesn't necessarily go away. If you have an adult friend or a partner or family member that has post-traumatic stress, it could not be just from something that happened to them in their adulthood, but from childhood that has impacted them greatly. So they did this study that had thousands and thousands of people in it. It was done by Kaiser Permanente in California, where people just came into their doctor's office and they filled out a form about different childhood adverse experiences, which I'll show you in a minute. And then they kind of correlated the results of that with whatever physical diagnosis people would have. And it's really interesting. It turns out that how they correlated it was that most people, 2 out of 3 adults, had at least one adverse childhood experience. And the more adverse childhood experiences a person had, the more physical health effects that you would have as an adult, and it really impacted your overall health status. So here's what they asked about. They asked about emotional, sexual, or physical abuse as a child. They asked about, was your mother treated violently? Was there substance abuse in your house? Was there untreated mental illness in your household? Were your parents separated or divorced? Were there any legal problems, family member in prison, and also neglect, emotional neglect, physical neglect in the house? Those are the questions I asked them. So most people, 2 out of 3 people actually had experienced at least one of those in their childhood. I'm going to talk a little bit about grief, because that often gets ignored as an adverse experience with people, and especially in kids. A lot of people experience grief. We're all going to experience it at some point. Welcome. Welcome. And with kids, sometimes it can get tricky because kids may not understand where they fall in with the grief. Sometimes they feel responsible. So complicated grief can be where the trauma symptoms really impact the grief response. And it may occur after like a really sudden death, unexpected death. Uncomplicated grief is feeling sad, missing the person. The sadness kind of dissipates over time. You still feel connected with that person. And you have good memories of the person interspersed with feeling sad. Complicated grief, though, in a person, it's like a child will really feel a loss of that attachment. They may feel like they were sort of maybe something to do with the person dying. They feel worthless, guilty, and it really impacts their self-identity growing up. Okay. Okay. Any questions about that? Feel free to raise your hand. Okay. Okay. So the developmental domains impacted by trauma as growing up. So it can impact your attachment, your actual brain development, and your emotional regulation. And these things can, they can go all the way into adulthood. And they look different in an adult than in a child. But in childhood with adverse experiences, this is kind of like what can happen. There can be difficult attaching to like your adults, poor boundaries, difficulty learning and really developing empathy. There is transgeneral trauma and sometimes transgeneral mistreatment, but trauma can actually be kind of passed down more of in a biological way. There's some research coming out with that it can be actually passed down through your DNA. With your biology, if there's a child who's traumatized, it can be like, they look like they have ADHD when they don't, they're kind of wound up. They might have a lot of physical complaints, somatic complaints, and they may have a hard time really regulating their feelings, knowing what to do with their anger, feeling sad, depressed, using substance abuse to kind of help with that. Sometimes people will sort of dissociate or feel like they're not really in themselves, or they're not really in their environment. Like they feel a little bit detached. And these things can carry on into an adulthood. They don't always do, but they can. So especially in kids, trauma can get kind of wired into how the brain develops, which is just really important to know. It can be treated, but it's not necessarily something that when a person turns 18, it kind of like goes away. Other domains are behavioral, your cognition, your self-concept, so behavior. So if you're traumatized as a child and it's really impacted you, you might act out more impulsively, might take more risks. An interesting one is difficulties with cause and effect. So I used to work in, for a long time, I worked in a residential program for juvenile offenders. So it was actually kind of bougie. It was like, kind of like the kids were adjudicated, but they lived in these nice cottages and it was on this rolling green acres and all this stuff. It was very nice, but one of the things I noticed about them is that they really didn't get cause and effect, kind of like, okay, if I do this, I may get arrested, or if I, that kind of thing. Those kids were very much traumatized, the kids in the juvenile justice system. And something about how they were learning is that they actually didn't fully get it, which is different than totally getting it and doing it anyway. If that makes sense. So that can be something that can happen. It can impact your brain development in that way. Other behaviors you might see in people include hurting themselves, self-injurious behaviors. Eating disorders is another, can be kind of like a self-injurious behavior as well. Difficulty regulating yourself or feeling safe enough or accepting yourself enough. So those are some of the things that you might see. With cognition, it can really impact a child's development as far as their just being able to learn. They might not get as good at grades in school. They may have a lot of trouble also with self-concept, meaning like, here's me, here's my boundaries. You're my friend, you're not my friend. Here's how I let people treat me, and here's how I treat other people. Sometimes those kinds of things can be interrupted by childhood trauma. Yes.
In the prior slide, under the emotional regulation.
Yeah.
You mentioned, depersonalization or disassociation. Could you expand on that?
Absolutely. So the question was about expanding on dissociation and depersonalization. That's quite a mouthful.
Yes.
Okay, so dissociation is something that you feel inside of yourself where you don't feel fully connected, and it can have, it's kind of like a range. So if we think about, we all have a little bit of this sometimes. Like, if you're driving on the same route every day, like say you're driving to work or you're driving to the grocery store or something, and you're not really thinking about it, that's a little bit like your brain could be totally somewhere else and you could be still getting to the store. That's kind of a little dissociation. You could be enjoying going out for a walk, kind of like feeling a little bit out of yourself. That would probably be a more pleasant way to kind of dissociate. But with trauma, it's more like I can't even tolerate where I am or who I am, and I'm checking out. And they might look like they're just fine. Sometimes you can't even tell when a person is experiencing this, because they might be sitting there kind of looking normal, and really in their head, they're not quite there. In really extreme examples, a person will not remember like a certain period of time. And it's your brain's way of protecting you really from that really intense feeling of fear, sadness, or memories of what happened. I see this a lot even in my own office, where somebody will kind of like go out of their window of tolerance for whatever it is they're talking about, and like they're not there for a little bit, and then they kind of like reground themselves. So this can be scary for people. Most people, like, they'll say, well, that was kind of good that I wasn't really paying attention. But some people will say, you know, I would really rather be okay with staying grounded, staying in control. Okay, I didn't say derealization. I should have that up there. Depersonalization is like that, is dissociation and depersonalization are kind of like the same thing, interchangeable. Derealization can happen too. It's where you're not exactly sure where you are, or things seem surreal. Like the world seems a little bit different. That can happen sometimes. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Does it? Okay, okay. Thank you. Thank you for asking.
Thank
Any other questions so far? This is a lot, I realize. You're like, I didn't sign up for all this, but okay. We're gonna have it right now. Okay, so we talked about behavior, cognition, and self-concept also being impacted by childhood trauma. So here's what happens to some adults who have childhood trauma, is they end up with more physical health problems, things that can actually be measured, like their heart and their vascular system, diabetes. People with childhood trauma, if they have kind of like a genetic link, are more likely to be an abuser of substances, which makes sense because It helps you avoid how you're feeling. They tend to even have an earlier death, which sounds doom and gloom, but there is hope for post-traumatic stress. These are some of the things that the study recognized. People are 4 times more likely to be depressed and also be at increased risk for intimate partner violence, whether they are the aggressor or the person on the receiving end of the aggression. And sometimes a traumatic childhood can just start a person on a path where things just kind of snowball. So, for example, if maybe they're not doing well in school or things aren't good at home, they might be using substances, they might get into trouble. If you have an unintended pregnancy, that kind of shapes your life sometimes. They might start smoking at an early age, that impacts your health. So it's very complicated how all these things go together. So this is a correlational study, but it's a pretty strong one where childhood trauma can really impact overall adult health, physical and emotional health. Any questions about that? Okay. Okay, so how does trauma exert such powerful effects? And we can think of adults and kids when we look at this, this slide. So it impacts the way you think. Because if you're feeling kind of in this state where you are remembering or you're feeling distressed, your brain doesn't really think on all cylinders. Kind of shuts down your rational thinking. At the same time, it's difficult to emotionally regulate, to calm yourself, to have appropriate choices about your feelings and how you're going to express them. And the part of your brain that's in charge of the fear response is really lit up. So if a person is having kind of a post-traumatic stress moment, this might be what's happening. It's hard to make good choices because you're not thinking straight. You're really feeling upset and it's hard to calm yourself back down. And you're probably having somewhere in there a lot of fear. And the fear could be not something that's actually there in front of you. It's probably something that you're remembering and it's coming back up. So post-traumatic stress happens oftentimes in places where there's no threat, but it feels like there is one, which is really important to think about. So even if the threat is past, it still feels like it's there. And that is what really makes a person suffer. That's where the suffering is. And also feeling like, okay, there's nothing I can do. This is just how it is. Pretty powerful stuff and very much having to do with the brain. Trauma can be acute, it can be chronic. And kind of the everyday chronic adverse experiences are often overlooked. So earlier in my presentation, we talked about kind of like the textbook things that happen, like being assaulted or being in a terrible accident or being in a war, things like that. Sometimes people have post-traumatic stress symptoms just by the life that they lead every day can feel threatening. So like childhood bullying can lead to feeling this way. If you live in a really dangerous neighborhood and you never really feel quite safe, that can be one. Living in a situation where things feel unsafe as far as like, is there going to be food on the table? Are my parents going to be here after school? You know, do we have a place to live? Those kinds of things can be a very ongoing adverse experience, which if you ask the person, they might be like, you know, it was fine. Well, you know, they don't even really think about it in that way sometimes. They just think that's how my life was. Like my parents like screamed at each other and my dad hit my mom like every week and they think, well, that's just the way it was. We tend to overlook these kinds of things. Can anybody, can anybody think of an example of like an ongoing chronic kind of maybe low level, maybe ignored adverse experience that people may go through.
I like divorce,
Mhm.
it's ongoing, especially with kids.
Yeah, yeah, for the people, the adults and the kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, all of that, like the conflict and the, like, can't predict it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lasted for a long time, like, yeah, that's your.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So divorce was brought up as one, both the adults and the kids.
Technology notifications,
Bing, 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 bing.
Teams messages.
You can't be in yourself when that's going on. Does it feel like it, like erodes your sense of the world?
Concentration.
Concentration, yeah, definitely. Yes. Thank you. Yeah,
A bad romantic relationship. It's
Yeah.
like, you know, I've been in ones where it's like. You don't feel like you can count on the person to be there for you, you don't, like, one day they might love you, the next day they wanna break up with you, like. And over time, like that constant fear of being abandoned or whatever, it just like wears you down.
yes, that's a wonderful example. So, a difficult romantic relationship where you can't count on the person. Sometimes they love you, sometimes they want to break up with you. You feel, it's like a setup for feeling abandoned. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And this can happen in all kinds of relationships. Or, feeling abandoned or worrying about being abandoned, can impact you, which abandonment is probably in the top 3 of worst human experiences, I would guess. Being abandoned or feeling like you are going to be abandoned. Thank you. What else?
Constant.
Having a narcissist in the family, a parent, and then if episodes I don't think
Mm-hmm.
and then children that might be around, not in the same zone.
Okay, so, the example was having a narcissist in the family, an adult, and the children not really understanding those dynamics that go with it. That makes a lot of sense when you think about it in terms of a person sees themselves differently, like they go through these experiences where they're not really even sure like who they are or what they are, you know, with that kind of a dynamic in the house. Yeah. Mhm. Thank you. Yes.
I was thinking like, just constant financial stress or crises. I mean, even if it's not talked about, you can pick up on stress from people if it's not even directly talked about.
Yeah.
So children, even if they're not hearing directly about what's happening, I would think it would affect them just by virtue of being stressed.
Yeah.
Stressed.
Yeah. So families living in financial stress and like over a period of time. There's a lot of tension and things may not feel as secure. Thank you. So this, these next things I think are really important and they're easier to remember than the other stuff I just said. So we think about themes of trauma. So this is where trauma lives in a person. This is what you might see, or if you've experienced trauma, this is what you might feel. Responsibility, safety, or control or. So responsibility has kind of 2 facets. So one of the facets could be it's something's wrong with me. Like it's my fault. I'm not lovable. I'm not good enough. The experience is leaving a person with the self-belief about themselves in that way. So it's not just a passing thought. It's more like really feeling like I'm really not good enough, something to that effect. And the other side of that is really feeling like you're never going to get better, feeling like you're irreparably damaged in some way. Some people talk about this idea of damaged goods, which is sort of like I remember one time, we bought a stove at a scratch and dent sale, and it was perfectly fine. Except for it had just like a little ding on one side, so they had I don't even know if they have scratch and dent sales anymore, but they used to. And we bought a stove at one, and it was just a little bit ding. So it's kind of like that person feeling like this is never gonna go away. I'm just like this now. So responsibility, safety, feeling like you can never actually be totally safe in the world. And control, not really feeling like you're in charge. That somebody else is gonna be in charge, that you can't make good decisions for yourself. So under this might be thoughts about yourself like, I can't trust myself. I can't trust my own judgment. So these are themes of negative self-beliefs a person can have when they've been through trauma. And these really impact how they move forward in their life. Like what they decide to do, who they decide to associate with, how they respond to stressors and other things. Yeah.
Maybe you're gonna touch on this in like the future slides, but I was curious about the control aspect, if that as an adult, if it impacts that person's relationships, like they feel like people are trying to control them or manipulate them when they're not doing it.
Possibly. So the question was the control aspect. How might that work in a relationship? So it could be seeing others as controlling when they're not. For sure. And it even could be all of a sudden you feel like you have to be the one in control. Like I was in a situation where I was not in control. It was really scary. So maybe now I'm going to interact with things so I can make sure that I feel like I'm in control, even though you still don't feel like you're in control. Yeah. Thank you. Oh, yes.
Would that also relate to a situation where you feel like you need to be in control because you haven't been in control, you haven't felt safe? So now you need to control, say, your children, your peers, your, people you associate with. Is that a
Yeah,
possible
yeah.
factor?
It's possible. It's possible. Yeah. So one way it could express itself is, feeling like you really need to control different people in your life and aspects of your life. Yeah. And remember, if someone is a controlling person, that doesn't mean they have post-traumatic stress disorder. Could be something else. They might be just a controlling person for some other reason, but this is one of the things that can happen, when a person does have post-traumatic stress. Yeah.
Well, and one of the things, with kids, I don't know, it comes down to sometimes the only thing a kid can control is eating or not eating. And I wonder if that was.
So a child, who experiences, not being, like feeling a loss of control with whatever happened to them. And then, taking it out on, okay, well, here's what I can decide. I can decide to eat or not eat, or what I'm gonna eat or what I'm not gonna eat. It could, yeah.
I've seen one of my kids just would only eat maybe 5 things as a toddler.
And sometimes toddlers just are really picky. This would be more like, if it was related to trauma, it would be more like, something where a person really felt like they couldn't control the situation that they were in. And it manifested in this way, like, I'm not in control, I have to do something. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay, let's look at the good stuff. Opportunities for healing. So we think about, either ourselves or others. These are some wonderful things, some places where healing can take place, not just in a therapist office or something like that, but in just regular life. What's really important is to conceptualize trauma as not what happened to you. It's, not what's wrong with you, but like what happened to you. Like not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you. I take this to the extreme. I do. Like, so if someone is walking up to me and they have a cast on their arm, I don't say, how'd you break your arm? Because they didn't do that on purpose, right? They're not inherently bad. They didn't like go and smash their arm against a wall, most likely. Something happened to them. You know, somebody says, well, what did you do? If they're hurt. No, it's not what's wrong with you, it's what happened to you. It's very different. Especially if someone's acting out or generally being really hard to deal with, this is a good thing to think about. Trauma responses are actually normal. It's what happened to the person that's not normal. So if you have a person who is isolating, or they are getting emotionally dysregulated, or they start doing things that seem like they are out of control, maybe that's kind of just their way of trying to take care of themselves because something bad happened. See how many times I'm gonna flip this. Okay. Okay. So opportunities for healing. So we think about what are some of the trauma reminders. Some people call them triggers. It's really good to know what those are for yourself or for the person you're trying to help. Some examples of this could be certain places, it could be certain kinds of people, it could be songs, it could be smells, it could be the ceiling or the floor tiles on the floor reminded you of something really bad that happened to you in grade school. Like even little stuff like that. It's usually stuff in the environment, but sometimes it can be an internal trigger, like a certain emotion could feel actually triggering. Like, oh, this is how I felt at that time. I'm reminded of it again. Can anyone think about things that could be trauma reminders? And you don't have to self-disclose. It's more just like a general question.
Pictures.
Pictures? Yeah, pictures. Mhm. Yeah,
Certain smells.
certain smells, definitely. Which also, that's an opportunity for healing. We're gonna talk about the senses as an opportunity for healing. Okay, so identifying what your trauma reminders are, and the thing with trauma is it's not to try to like expose yourself to all those things just to prove that you can do it. Like if there is something that you don't really have to do, or somebody you really don't have to see, that's okay. Try not to overload yourself with those reminders. Sometimes you can't avoid them, or it's not healthy to, but we try to think about keeping ourselves in like this little window of what we can handle. So pay attention to situations that might generate a strong like physical response in yourself. That might give you a clue as to what the trauma, like this is a trauma reminder. Like suddenly I'm feeling really tense inside, or my stomach hurts, or I have this weird tingling feeling in my arms. It could be anything, something different. Listen to your mind, listen to your body, which can be hard for a person who's been through something because they don't trust themselves. But it's really trying to listen to what your mind and body are telling you. And have I been here before? So we think about, okay, why, some people will say, I don't even know what happened. I was just really upset. And then like, I felt like I was freaking out and I have no idea what was going on. And then if you say, like, have you been here before? Meaning like, metaphorically, have you been in this kind of situation before? It's like, oh, that's what it is. I have sort of been through something like this before, and now I'm having a response. Being able to make those connections for yourself or helping the other person make those connections can be really helpful. Here's the good one, then versus now. So usually when a person is having a traumatic response, it feels like it's then. And what's really important is to somehow figure out that it's not then, it's now. And you can even do that just by, I don't know, running it like, what is my hair like now? Oh yeah, it wasn't like this when I was 10. Or I'm wearing different clothes, or I'm in a different place that wasn't there when the thing happened. It can be just grounding yourself in that way. Then versus now is really important. So the body is a great avenue for healing. Oftentimes more than just trying to, talk to someone. Participating in things that are enjoyable can help turn your mind and calm your body. There's lots of mindful activities that people do, like crafting can be a mindful activity. Have you guys ever seen those little bookmarks or whatever, the diamond art where you like put glue little tiny things on? Okay, like that, even that could be like, okay, this is enjoyable and it totally calms your body. Exercising, doing just fun things, anything that you like to do, that can be really helpful. Taking some deep breaths. How this works is it helps your brain switch off from fight or flight mode into more relaxed mode. Even if you don't think it's going to work, it will. The breathing and having some really just calm mental imagery. Oftentimes, these things can be done proactively. So you may not wait until you're totally dysregulated to have this calm imagery thing. Maybe you kind of practice it when you're feeling okay. Maybe you kind of practice the breathing while you're feeling okay. And then when it comes time to really need it, you remember what to do. So practicing these things, just checking the time. Muscle relaxation. Does anybody like go to the gym at all or ever in their entire life and lift weights? Okay, so you know how like sometimes when your muscles really tense and then you let the weight go and it's like, kind of feels kind of wiggly, maybe a little, or you feel like the blood rushing in. So this is what muscle relaxation can do for you. It can even be like tensing your muscles on purpose, one by one, and letting them go. It could be doing a body scan, like saying, okay, I'm going to start at the top of my head and I'm just going to check in with myself and notice where there's tension and just kind of like it lets go from there. This can be helpful too. Does anybody have anybody like done any of these activities before? I'm getting some head nods. Okay. Are they good? Yeah, thumbs up. Okay. Sleep and nutrition. Something we like to forget about. We're on our phones. We're running around doing all these things. That can be very helpful for your brain to reset and to take good care of yourself. So some of these things are in your body. You think about the body as an avenue for healing. These are things that we can do to help our bodies cope. Any like comments about this? Yeah.
We had a babysitter who did tapping,
Tapping, yes.
I don't know, all over different spots depending on what was going on
With the kids?
herself,
Oh, herself.
to calm herself down.
Okay, okay. So the thing, the idea brought up was tapping. Does anybody know what this is? Yes,
My wife and I just took a course in it.
you did.
In fact, I have an app.
You do.
Yeah.
There's an app for tapping.
Well, she was 2005.
I'm curious what the app is.
I'll find it and I'll tell you. No, that's that's gonna be yes, Peaceful Heart Network.
Peaceful Heart.
Yeah.
Okay.
We went through a 3-hour workshop on it,
Wow.
different practice, but it gives you various things. And there's a 5-minute self-help thing there, and they actually have a movie on it, and stress and trauma.
Mhm.
And
It's a free app,
It's just a free app.
Peaceful Heart.
Peaceful Heart app,
Peaceful Heart Network.
Peaceful Heart Network, okay. Okay. I don't feel like I need to demonstrate tapping, but I've got a microphone in my hand, but I'm gonna put the microphone down. So, it's the idea of like it stimulates your brain to do this back and forth bilateral thing, and it like calms you down. So it can be facilitated in different ways. I'm gonna do it. There's one thing called the butterfly hug. Does anybody know about butterfly hug? Okay, so you do this. And then all you do is you just, that. Keep doing that. For a while. And it looks weird, but it does this thing where your brain just stops doing like the really upset thing. And if you don't feel like you're in a place where you can do that, because like you're in a meeting or something, you can always do it on your legs, like this. If you think about it, okay, so hopefully everybody on the video saw that. They might not have been able to hear me, but we're thinking about using this rhythmic back and forth tapping to help your brain calm itself. And it does. And if you think about other things that we do that are activities that are rhythmic, like walking, running, doing something that's like, or riding a bike, it's like the same thing. It kind of does that to your brain too. But you can do this for yourself when you're just sitting around and you're like, oh, okay, I just saw something scary on the news and I'm just gonna tap my hands now on my legs, see if I can feel better. Okay,
You have to be doing that every day.
every day we're gonna be doing that. Yes, you're right.
Thanks for the export.
Okay. Mindfulness and acceptance is an opportunity for healing. So practicing mindfulness, we're going to do a little exercise in a minute about that, which hopefully will be relaxing. Okay, so thinking about mindfulness, that means that you're present. You're just here. You're not really thinking about yesterday, last month, next week. It's just being here now. It helps just accept where you're at. Connecting with others can be really great, is also for a person who's been through trauma, or you're trying to help somebody who's had trauma. Like social stuff, and we're more and more socially isolated. If you think about it, you know, there's a million streaming services on TV. Sometimes it's easier to stay home. Sometimes we can just, I don't know, connect with people on social media, but actually connecting with others can be very helpful with mental health. Post-traumatic stress as well, and self-expression. So art, writing, dance, sidewalk chalk, I don't know, anything that you feel like you like to do that's expressing yourself. When I was working with younger kids who had trauma, this was, you know, generally how they worked through their trauma. They just played, or they drew, or they even just told me their story while they were like fiddling around in a sandbox with stuff. Like just being able to do that can help calm the mind and express what you're feeling. Okay. So more about supporting others with post-traumatic stress. So if you have a loved one, you have a friend, even if it's yourself, listening to that person without judgment is really important. Because remember, they are judging themselves all the time. That they're not feeling right in themselves. And they might think that what they're going through is kind of like not normal. So just being able to hear them without judging them off the bat, and improves your communication with them also. Giving a person space if they need it. And helping a person ground to the present moment can be really helpful. So, for example, you can even do this by, say you need help washing the dishes and someone in your household is feeling a little bit iffy, or it looks like they're feeling upset. Hand them the dishcloth and say, okay, now we're gonna dry the dishes. Something like that. It's like, oh, here we are, we're back. We're back in this room right now. Just grounding yourself to the present. How might a person ground themselves otherwise? Can you think of anything that just, you feel like, okay, I'm back. I can touch something, I can be present with this task, or something that I can actually hold in my hand or hear. What do you guys do to try to stay kind of grounded? Any ideas? Okay, so we'll work on that. We will work on that. Okay. If someone you know is experiencing this, it's important to help support them if they're in therapy, if they need medicine, that's again like the no judgment, to actually help this, like facilitate this, helping them get treatment. Doing activities together that are fun for everyone, could be movies, games, it could be any kind of activity, but really getting that person connected. Encouraging contact with friends and family. So if you have a person that's isolating themselves and is depressed, these are good things. And they sound really easy. But sometimes we don't really think about them in this way, that they could be therapeutic, and they really can be therapeutic. Learning what their triggers are, planning for those triggers, planning ahead, and just kind of being cognizant of any change in mood and energy that the person might show. That might tip you off that they're going through something or they're having a moment. Here's something that we often don't talk about, managing someone else's anger. Because anger is one of the emotions that people show sometimes if they have post-traumatic stress. So having kind of a plan, knowing that there can be a timeout, adult or kid, like you might need timeout from each other. Just like decide on a signal for a timeout, like if you are in a shouting match with your partner and that person is elevated or triggered, like kind of knowing, okay, here's a signal that we need to step away to manage that anger. And then using your I statements to talk to somebody when they're calming down. When someone's angry, you can't really talk as much. You have to kind of wait till everyone's feeling a little more calm and then using your I statements. So instead of saying like, you really blah, 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 it's more like, I feel like this when this happened. Really important. It helps a person stay grounded, helps you stay grounded, and being open to their ideas. So these are all things that can be helpful when another person is angry, especially if they've been in trauma and they're feeling triggered and their response is anger. Giving each other space. Listen without interrupting. Secondary trauma. Can you guys guess what that is? It means like you're around trauma so much, even if it didn't happen to you, you start to feel it. And this can happen professionally, like a lot of people who work in healthcare, or if you're a paramedic or something like that, you can get this. But even just being with a person all the time who is struggling with post-traumatic stress, it can impact you as well. And it's really important to validate that, to acknowledge that that's happening. That it's normal to have emotions, that you can also take care of you, your physical and your emotional health. Go to your doctor. It's not just the other person that gets to go to the doctor. You can go to the doctor. And practicing healthy habits yourself. It's really important just to know that this isn't something that happens to people, secondary trauma, where they're feeling a change in themselves because of trying to support another person. Finding your own support and your own fun things to do is nice. Having people help you, like if you need somebody to drive your kid to school that day, then you ask for that. Try to get help for yourself. Asking friends, family, tapping into your community, whatever that is. Coworkers, your neighbors, church. Acknowledging that you need support too. Okay, How much time do we have?
30 minutes.
30 minutes.
30 minutes, we got 30 minutes, okay. Okay. Okay, we're gonna kind of switch into talking more about mindfulness. Does anybody have any comments from just the last little bit? Yeah, oh, I didn't talk about the resilience thing, did I? The protective factors.
Oh, right.
I will talk about that, but go ahead.
I was gonna ask, for, one of the items on the slide was like planning for a trigger. and I just
Yeah.
wonder what that might look like, and what that is.
Okay. Well, maybe I don't have to go through all of those. Okay, so planning for somebody else's trigger, or maybe even your own trigger, but especially when it's somebody else. Like if you notice that somebody's dysregulated emotionally, like feeling upset or angry or acting out in a certain way or withdrawing in a certain way, just taking notice of maybe where you might be, who's around, what time of day, what time of week, if there's anything special that you notice. And if planning to manage that could be talking about it with the person beforehand, like if it's something that you just have to do. Acknowledging that this is hard for them, talking about ahead of time, like how to manage their emotions. You know, assuring them that you're there or connecting them with others that can be supportive during that time. So kind of like having a safety plan in place that you can know what to do when the time comes, and also that the person just feels really validated and heard. And they know that you've got their back. And the question you had before about what can be something that could predict if someone gets post-traumatic stress? Is that the question? I think that you had
What some of the protective factors are.
some of the protective factors. So why would a person not get post-traumatic stress when they've been through something bad? So part of it can be your personal emotional brain, like your sensitivity to something. It could be that you have some abilities, some talents, some skills, some things you like to do that can help you feel better about yourself and give you other good things to invest your time in. You might have a supportive family network around you. You might have financial resources to get treatment. And just financial resources to feel comfortable in life. So that's not a stressor. You might have just like a really adept brain. Like sometimes if a person is just like has good things that they're doing and feels competent in things, that can be protective. Yeah, and also not having like maybe a lot of other things in their life that are stressors. Social support and family support can be really important. One thing that I've noticed, this is like a really good example of this. Of what can be protection and what can actually make it so that a person still struggles with post-traumatic stress. So I have worked with a person who had childhood abuse, and they have so many strengths in every possible way. Like you would see this person and you would think, my gosh, this person is like on point, running the show, their like career, family, really bright, whatever, everything. But the one thing that they didn't have when they were a kid is that they couldn't tell their story because nobody, like they got shut down all the time. Like their mom shut them down, school counselor shut them down, like everybody shut them down. And I just had the sense that if this person who's an adult now, like could actually have a parent who believed her and protected her, she would be totally different I don't think she would have the kind of post-traumatic stress that she has. That's like the most important thing, is to believe a person, to support the person, especially the child. That's like, I think one of the best things that you can do for a person is to actually like be there for them, support them, protect them if they need protecting.
Yeah, I was just gonna, I guess like, something I realized in my adulthood is that one of my like triggers of feeling stressed out or whatever is like not being validated, you know, like when I'm going through something or I want to talk about something or want to be heard about something, like not being validated is like sends me straight through the roof, you know? So yeah, so I believe what you're saying is what I'm.
Yeah, so validation is really important. Okay, let's talk about mindfulness, and we're gonna have a mindfulness exercise for fun, before the snow comes in. So I just thought I don't know if you guys can see these, slides, I thought they were kind of fun. Think about mindfulness is like kind of being present, not thinking, so not thinking of you, finder center, but the donut doesn't have one. Are you thinking what I'm not thinking? So mindfulness. So it's kind of like being able to live with your experiences and not in that moment, not having to do anything about them. That's the tricky part because most of us want to fix or get rid of pain right away. So mindfulness is about trying to just be in this moment and not having to worry about future or past, and kind of, it allows you to live side by side with your life. Mindfulness is this thing. So mindfulness is actually just trying to be in the present moment. So there's some things that we do a lot that we are mindful without even trying. I know sometimes when I'm walking my dog, I'm just mindful, like, especially if I don't have my, like, my AirPods in, I'm just like listening to whatever's out there. And I'm looking at my dog and she's really cute and it's like really cold outside and I can feel that. And then the wind starts blowing. It's like all of these things are just in that moment. What do you guys like to do that you feel like just present and you're not really thinking about other stuff? Working in the garden, working in the dirt, feeling that in your hand, yeah.
Exercising.
Exercising is a good one, yeah, absolutely.
Reading a book.
Reading a book, yeah, because you're just in that story or whatever it is, in that information for a little bit. Even washing the dishes can be mindful, like if you really pay attention to it. Right?
Cooking with a recipe.
Cooking with a recipe, sure. There's lots of things that we do every day that we stay in the moment, and we can create these things for ourselves as well. So mindfulness can help get us out of the kind of the stuck feeling, the fight or flight feeling. It can bring down your stress in your body so you feel a lot better, so that then you can access your brain again. Because if you're really, really distressed, you can't really access your rational thinking and your emotions are kind of haywire. So it helps us, mindfulness helps us calm our body, and then we can proceed. So mindfulness is staying in the present, and then when your mind wanders, it's going back to the present, going back to it. Observing and describing without judgment. This is one of my favorite things. Observe and describe. So if I was going to observe and describe this room without judging it, I would say there's 2 chandeliers. There's some ceiling tiles. There's this carpet that's like black and gold and rusty red. And there's medallions on it. And there's some hot tea and drinks over there. If I was going to judge this room, do you think it would sound different? It might, right? Like and it could be good or bad. It'd be like, wow, that was really nice that there's drinks and stuff over there. That was awesome. And it could be like, wow, this carpet's beautiful. Or, I'm kind of scared of that owl thing. It could be, we all tend to judge. So one way to be mindful is to just observe in the moment and just to describe it in a completely objective way. And you can do this with your own self. You can do it with yourself. Like if you've ever like looked down at your shin and saw a bruise and said, where did that come from? That's observing and describing. It's not like, oh my God, my leg's gonna fall off. It's just like, oh, I got a bruise. Oh, okay. And then you move on. This can be really helpful for yourself and for helping another person. Helps you just kind of like accept what you've got. So you're not really zoning out, you're kind of focusing in. It's not really a bad distraction technique. Some people don't like distractions because they think that's cheating, but it's not really cheating to do this. Just bringing non-judgmental awareness to the present moment. Can be very good for your health in all kinds of ways, physical, mental, creative, emotional health. Okay, let's try something. You guys want to try something? Okay, let's see how this goes. And actually, if it feels like, I don't know if I can do this, or if your mind starts to wander in the middle of it, that's okay, that's normal, it's just part of being a person. So, right now, just kind of get comfortable. You guys do look comfortable for the most part, which is good. And so just kind of get settled. And what we're gonna do is just feel grounded and notice what is around us. Just using what we have, using our senses, and not all at once. And we're not gonna count things or anything like that. We're just gonna notice. So just for a minute, just focus on your sense of sight. Use your eyes. They can settle on one thing even. You don't have to take an inventory. Just really tune into whatever it is that your eyes are seeing. Shapes, colors, light and dark or shades. You might notice something looks like it has a texture. Really just tune in with your eyes on whatever they happen to fall upon. And if your mind wanders, that is totally fine. Just bring it back to what you're doing. It's not like you're, no way to mess this up. Just notice with your eyes. Now shift your attention to what you can hear. And just really listen. Just notice with your ears. Continue just to breathe and turn your mind to your sense of touch. So you might notice how the chair is supporting your weight, how it feels without judgment, just noticing. You might even notice your feet on the floor. You may notice you're wearing socks or not. Tuning into that sense of touch. You may notice how maybe an article of clothing might feel, or the chair. Just tuning into that. You may notice the temperature. And anything that you may even be feeling in your body without having to do anything about it. All the while just taking some nice, even breaths. Feeling yourself on the chair, feet on the floor and connected. May turn your mind to your other senses. You notice any smells or tastes. And you may or may not, and just to noticing. Nice breath. Let it go. And when you're ready to come back. What did you notice about that? What was that like? Peaceful, calming? Did anyone catch themselves judging themselves? Okay. Right. Did anybody have thoughts that floated in or out? Like other thoughts? Yeah, of course you do. Of course you're gonna have thoughts. So it's more like, okay, I just thought about that and I'm gonna go back to like looking at the floor or wherever it was. Yeah, giving yourself permission to just be in the spot. This can be really fun if you're in a beautiful place, but it also can work if you're just in a place. You don't have to be sitting on a beach to do it, or, it can be kind of cool to do this with, like a Jolly Rancher. Or a Hershey's Kiss or something like that, where you can like really taste it and all you're doing is tasting it. You can do a mindfulness exercise like that. So the whole idea is just to be kind of like tuned in to whatever it is that you're doing, which can calm your body, calm your mind, and give you like a nice reset and give you some perspective, kind of, in like a nice way. Yeah.
I guess that was a little longer than I expected. Is there like a helpful length of time to do a mindfulness exercise for? 'Cause I've been instructed to do those sometimes, but when I'm really worked up, like the last thing I want to do is calm down. Like I just want to freak out. So, and like I try some mindfulness things at the time, but I probably am not doing them for long enough, to make any impact. So it's like I'll do something and I'll be like, nope, I'm still stressed out. And then I'm just like,
Yeah. So if you're feeling, really kind of amped up in the physical way, go with it. Go with, if you need to like intensely move your body, do that. And even if you have to stay in the same place, like do push-ups or jump up and down or jog in place. I mean, something like put your energy into that. That can be mindful. One thing that can be really helpful when you're feeling like this is just finding something cold and putting it on your face or splashing your face with water. That'll be mindful real fast. And it also calms your brain down. But yeah, so like your mindfulness in that moment, if you're feeling really like that, might be something more physical than this. That's a very good point. So being creative with your mindfulness is always good. Whatever works.
It's the same concept as like a cold glass of water sort of.
Yes. Yeah, maybe put some ice like on your forehead, choose some ice.
Drinking it too, or?
Yeah, yeah. The cold really helps. Yeah.
And that's where I became aware of this tapping idea because the babysitter was talking about how she was so angry sitting at a red light that she started tapping her side, like really hard, like to distract her brain from what she was really upset about.
So she kind of discovered the tapping on her, and her,
It was
Oh.
kind of a program,
oh, okay,
but she,
okay.
like, depending on what it was different parts of the body, I don't know.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tap.
Using cold is like a good emergency,
It was like,
calming down tool. Kind of like what they used to do in the movies, like splash their face with
Yeah.
water. Actually works.
it's really like a distraction, right? Just to.
It actually turns something off in your brain, turns it down the fight or flight. It's interesting. So later we can all put our faces in the snowbanks, right? That's what. Yes,
I'm just kind of curious how some of these might relate to self-harm behaviors, like the cutter. Does cutting yourself result in the same sort of soothing of the fight or flight response? Is it function the same way?
okay, so the question, this is for the people online, can self-harm function the same way as far as like calming the body for a person who's doing it? Like cutting yourself? Yes, it can. It can be a different kind of pain that can feel more soothing than whatever the emotional pain is. There's different reasons why people may self-harm. But one of the reasons is to kind of bring themselves back down. Yeah. Yeah, so in that way, it kind of makes sense why somebody might try that or get into a habit of that, especially if it works for them. Yeah. I'm just looking at the time. We've got about 10 minutes, which is good. What else about that? Anything else? That was a good question about the self-harm. All of these are good questions. Okay, so in your packet, there's a couple of just little fun exercises that you might be able to either do yourself or teach your person who has trauma. Here's the stop exercise. So, just like pausing whatever you're doing, take a breath and noticing the breath, observing what's happening without judging it, and then just proceed. So this is a quick one. This is like, okay, I'm gonna take a minute or a second. I'm just gonna stop. I'm gonna take a breath. I'm gonna look around. And then I'm just gonna keep going. It's just kind of like interrupts the flow. You can even teach this to like kids, right? They can definitely learn this. RAIN is another one. So these acronyms are supposed to help us remember. Who knows if they do? But the idea is to like, it's kind of a little bit similar. It's like recognizing what's happening. So it could be, I'm feeling really upset right now. I feel like I want to run away. I feel like I want to do something reckless, but just noticing what's happening. Just allow it to be the way it is, accept. See how that feels, just kind of be a little bit like a scientist, investigate. Like, don't really have to fix it. We're just gonna kind of investigate it right now. And then realize what you're feeling will pass, because it will. So kind of just like, don't identify with it. So non-identification, like I'm having this feeling, I'm having this memory, but it's not actually me. It's not me. Recognizing what's happening, just noticing it without judging it, just kind of like sitting with it and then knowing that it will pass. I'm wondering if any of these seem like they're like a quicker kind of mindfulness. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so those are some good things that we can all do for ourselves and each other. Professional help may come in with things, when it feels like either like the person is really having a lot of intrusive memories where it's hard to really kind of get through their day well, that they're really having trouble sleeping, and really feeling some deep shame or self-blame. They might be using more alcohol or drugs or hurting themselves, having suicidal thoughts. And you don't have to wait for these things to happen to get professional help, for sure, but these are some good signs. And there's lots of trauma-focused interventions that people can experience. EMDR, trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, which is like an evidence-based curriculum for kids. There's a program called DART, which is more of like a developmental attachment kind of therapy. Just cognitive behavioral therapy can all be helpful. Yeah, so my next slides are just kind of explaining more of these things, but I wanted to provide the opportunity for more questions and comments in the time that we have remaining. And I really appreciate all of your interest and kind of how you're relating it to your own experiences. I really appreciate that. Are there any questions that are on the chat as well? We can take those as well.
You mentioned it, so whoever it was that did the study on really early on, the ad.
Yeah, the study. Yeah.
That you said.
It was Kaiser Permanente. It's like a big, like, health insurance thing. It's like a health hospital study. Yeah. Hospital study, healthcare system. Yeah.
So I have a brother who was in the Army for 10 years and deployed all over the world. And he has PTSD related to his experiences. I have never really talked to him about specifically what his triggers are, but I'm wondering, like, when it comes to, you know, that type of trauma, is it just that once somebody realizes this is what their condition is, that they've been affected by all of that, is it just that really there needs to be professional treatment that's kind of ongoing, because you just never know when something's going to pop up and it's going to cause.
So question about just treatment or
Yeah, just
like
like
intensity of
generally
treatment?
Because the PTSD, you know, it occurred and it was built upon, it just is so ingrained at this point.
Okay. So sometimes therapy for post-traumatic stress can be fairly efficient, and sometimes it takes much longer. It just depends on the person. Yeah, but it can definitely get better. Post-traumatic stress can get better. It's very treatable.
There's two questions in the chat, Doctor. The first one is PTSD permanent? Something you will deal with for the rest of your life?
The answer to the question about is PTSD permanent? No, it does not have to be. It sometimes can be, but it's definitely treatable, like using the therapeutic techniques that are used in these interventions can really help a person change how they see themselves in relation to the world, especially with those themes of responsibility, safety, and control, because that's what kind of keeps the trauma in. So helping with those things can release that trauma from a person. Yeah.
And then the other question, we talked about, you know, like the emotional, physical, so on and so forth. The question is, would a chronic illness play a role in this, such as a child with leukemia or the sibling of that child and the stress that appears on the parents?
So can trauma occur with a chronic illness, like a child with leukemia? Absolutely, absolutely. That was something I didn't bring up and I should have brought up, chronic illness. And all of the treatments that go with it and all of the losses that go with that. Things that you don't get to do, fear, worry, not being in control. Not feeling like your body is yours, and then witnessing like a loved one, like if a sibling, definitely, that can be an impact. Yeah, I agree. Okay, so we've got the chat questions answered.
So, I have a question. So say a child is in a trauma situation like that, say chronic illness and then death. Something like that, and they appear to have like worked through it, and then later in life, as they get to be young adults, get something. Bad relationship, like just settle over the edge.
So, yeah, so that's a really interesting question. So the question was about, say a child goes through something traumatic, gets treatment or whatever, and they look like they're fine. Can it pop back up later? And the answer is yes. Absolutely, that's not uncommon because as a child grows up, their development, their brain will change, they'll understand more, they'll see things in a different way. They might need to reprocess it all over again using their like teenage brain or their young adult brain. And sometimes like little kids may not totally get what it was. And then when they grow up, they're like, oh my gosh. And then, yeah, so that would be normal and it's not saying that it's gonna be a poor prognosis. It's just that can happen. Mhm. Any other questions for now? Oh, yeah, one more, okay.
I know. Talked about, trauma can interfere with normal breathing. I guess. Maybe you did explain it. Okay, yeah, never mind. I
Are you
got
good?
it. I'm fine.
Okay, we're good, okay. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. I enjoyed being here.
Thank you, Dr. Schrantz.